Hi, mystery writers. Hello. I hope you're staying warm. It's cold and chilly here in Oregon. Um, Today, I wanted to talk about working with twists and obstacles in your mystery and how you can use your detective, your sleuth, to come up with some great ideas about creating those obstacles because it's a big part of making your story engaging is to get those obstacles in front of your sleuth so they have trouble. We're creating trouble for our protagonist. And so let's kind of dive in and look at what that means. Um, your sleuth protagonist may not have a character arc per se. Unlike many genres, your sleuth does not need to learn a lesson as the story progresses, but you can deepen the character and make events in the story feel emotionally challenging by matching the character traits of your detective and the story obstacles opposite to those traits to elicit an understanding of your character. So, you reader, you're deepening the empathy, and at the same time, you're creating obstacles for your protagonist. The first lesson in Write a Killer Mystery approaches detailing your novel's detective, and you'd establish your sleuth's character traits. And of course, one of your sleuth's traits is their ability to solve crime. So, as you put together your protagonist's strengths and weaknesses, you are also setting up ways to challenge your sleuth by playing off those strengths and weaknesses. So, all that character background work that you do in the beginning is really going to help you formulate an intriguing story for your readers. So, once you have a good idea of what those character traits are, um, just go ahead and find the opposite of each trait. So you're going to be setting up challenges for your sleuth that feel integral to your story. So you want to create problems that play off both their strengths and their weaknesses. And even with strengths, you can have too much of a good thing in the wrong situation. And so you can use those character traits to create situations for your scenes where your sleuth is definitely challenged. So let's look at some examples of opposites. All right. So, for instance, your sleuth may have great critical thinking skills, right? And the opposite is overthinking when it's time for action. So your detective is stalling their own path to solving the mystery puzzle. Or think of a weakness like a soft spot for kids and kittens, and and on the opposite, he or she may have to deal with a kid who's got lots of charm, uh, but who lies, right? And another traditional strength is just physical strength. And the opposite is they're like a bull in a china shop when it comes to the crime scene. They blunder through, they disturb evidence. Anyway, you get the idea. Look at your strengths, look at your weaknesses for your sleuth, and then come up with what the opposite would be and think of ways to employ those opposite scenarios in your story. And you're going to be well on the way to coming up with twists and obstacles for your story, which is a big part of creating that mystery story. Is you want to have trouble for your sleuth, because if they could solve it right away, there wouldn't be much of a story. All right, so let's look at brainstorming some traditional um, novel obstacles. Even if they turn out to be wrong, as your sleuth solves the crime, they create plans and goals for reaching their objective, right? So let's look at some ways to use traditional storytelling obstacles and match them up with your sleuth strengths and weaknesses. So first is intellectual strength, and the obstacles are part and parcel of challenging your sleuth's critical thinking skills. Your sleuth must discern the false clues from the actual evidence, and they need to sort through the information from suspects, often hidden by lies and misdirection for whatever reason that suspect is lying. Um, so, if you have a smart sleuth, think of ways that seem plausible and logical that you lead your sleuth in the wrong direction. They just go off on there. They've got this all figured out in their head. This is really something you can do right before the midpoint. They think they've got it all figured out in their head, and yet it's not working. All right. And these obstacles result in disappointment and frustration, which is a big part of that midpoint sag when your sleuth feels like it's not even worth pursuing this puzzle anymore. Okay, that's intellectual. And then physical, if your sleuth hates the heat and doesn't function well, just crank up the temperature in your story. If your sleuth is diminutive and uses their thinking skills, match them with a locked door they must enter. The idea is to find a physical challenge that impacts your sleuth physical limitations. So crank up the temperature. That means even if they're in a place that is normally cold, they may be in a room that's overheated. Um, Say they're interviewing a suspect and the room is overheated and they feel hot and they're really uncomfortable. How does that impact their interview with the suspect? That's just an idea, but you get the idea, right? All right, so we have intellectual and physical, and there's also social. Whatever your sleuth's social background, you can pit them against someone from another social strata, and your sleuth will need to deal with the other character's misperceptions of who they, the sleuth, are, and vice versa. Your sleuth may be uncomfortable surrounded by the very poor, or feel resentment when confronted by people with power. So you can match up the social strata with scenarios in your story that challenge who the sleuth is and their cultural beliefs from their social strata. And then there's emotional. Emotional challenges create powerful connections with your readers. So pit your sleuth's emotional challenges against not only their external goal to find the villain, but their uncertainties and frailties in personal interactions with friends and peers and even with suspects. So, does your sleuth shy away from emotional entanglements and they're like commitment reluctant? But then they meet someone they like? Do they mess it up to keep from being committed? And if they're afraid of heights, do you put them at the top of a tower chasing the villain? So think of those emotional strengths and weaknesses that your sleuth has. And then also one more thing that you can use is political. Even if your sleuth believes they are apolitical, politics impacts their investigation. From internal politics in a law enforcement agency to powers that be intruding into the investigation, you can challenge your sleuth with power politics. Okay, just want to follow all that up with why matching challenges to traits works. All right. When you take the character based approach to creating challenges for your mystery sleuth, you deepen the character for your reader and you build that connection. The reader really connects with them because they understand who your character is. So, challenges matched up to your sleuth character trait imply an organic feeling to that storyline that keeps your reader emotionally attached to your character. Rather than simply creating new challenges, you create obstacles based on your character's personality, and it's going to really impact what happens in your story and how the reader feels about the situation and how much they care about whether the sleuth can get out of a tough situation. These conflicts feel personal to your reader, and and they are rooting for your sleuth. Remember, your sleuth is their guide through that mystery puzzle. Um, and the conflicts feel personal. They feel personal to your sleuth, and therefore they feel personal to your reader. So the twists that lead your detective in a new direction or temporarily knock them off track become integral to understanding your sleuth's character. This is a powerful combo for getting your reader really involved in your story. All right. And so when you feel you're stuck for a new twist, look at the character traits of your detective and think of opposites. And I'm sure you can probably come up with some great challenges for your sleuth. Okay, that's pretty much it for today. As always, if you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this. And also, I'd love to hear if this helps you. I know for me, this was a great breakthrough because I always had trouble creating conflict and twists in my story. And looking at the sleuth and looking at their personal strengths and weaknesses and then coming up with opposites really helped me devise um, obstacles that were meaningful in the story. All right, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Keep writing.